What's going on? This is your man John Fortune, your host of the Frustrated Fan Sports Show, and today this is a special edition of the Frustrated Fan Sports Show because this is more about, so I'm going to be talking about the benching of Bryce Young and the fact that we've seen this happen for so much. We've seen this happen so much. So many different players, so many different guys have gone through this exact same thing where, you know, they sit up there, because understand this is his second offense he's learned. You know, Bryce Young, starting from his rookie year and even coming into the NFL draft, what we saw at Alabama was not a fluke. When everybody was evaluating these quarterbacks, myself included, we saw the accuracy that Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud had. We saw that. We saw that on display. We saw what could have happened. And starting out, we in Washington have seen this too. There is a difference when the owner wants a certain guy and the coach wants a certain guy. And what ends up happening is the owner and the coach gets into this tussling match and ends up in the process hurting the quarterback because they're too busy focusing on their egos. And I remember when Frank Reich was fired. And at the time I was like, man, that's crazy to fire him. But rightfully so, he should have been fired. Because Frank Reich didn't try his best to get the most out of Bryce Young. All he did was focus on the fact that he didn't get C.J. Stroud, the guy he really wanted. And we've seen this happen before. We saw it here happen in Washington with Dwayne Haskins. Jay Gruden didn't want Dwayne Haskins. The owner wanted Dwayne Haskins. And next thing you know, Jay coached just like he didn't want Dwayne Haskins. And then it wasn't until Kevin O'Connell came in and started to work with Dwayne that we saw Dwayne even slightly progress. But then that went to hell because Ron Rivera brought his butt in, and then immediately, again, they don't know how to develop quarterbacks, but again, they failed at that. And here now, Bryce Young is in a situation where now he's benched 2 games into the season. 2 games into the season. He had nothing, no weapons around him. The offensive line isn't that great. And yet and still, somehow, some way, he's supposed to be great. And then everybody wants to give Canella all this praise for Baker Mayfield when we saw Baker Mayfield playing well when he was in St. Louis. I mean, well, when he was with the Rams. When we saw Baker with the Rams, we saw him play very well. We saw that. So Canella didn't have nothing to do with fixing Baker Mayfield. No, he didn't. Baker was already fixed. It's just that what was happening was that he was getting better. And now here we are, a young quarterback. Again, what we saw him do in college, understand, and that's probably a little bit of, remember, he didn't have a lot of receiving threats at Alabama when he was there. He had a running back. He had a really good running back. But he didn't have a lot of receiving threats there, and he was still found a way to make it happen. Not only that, this guy was extremely accurate at Alabama. There's no way you telling me he comes in the NFL and he loses it all. He didn't lose it all. It's because Frank Reich didn't want him. And then all of a sudden, as time kept going on, everybody wasn't doing anything to develop him properly because the entire coaching staff knew they were going to be fired the very next year. They knew that. So they had no incentive to sit up there and make Bryce better. And now here we are now in a situation where 2 games in, he's now benched. 2 games in. Carolina is still an awful team. It's still an awful team. There still wasn't a lot for them to work on, a lot for him to really work with. And again, he's learning his second offense. He's only been in the league for 2 years and already he's in his second offense, where C.J. Stroud is in the same offense he started out in. Not to mention he went to a better team. I remember I said Bryce Young should have went to the Houston Texans. It's so sad to see this because we've seen countless quarterbacks come into teams, and we've seen, and there's always the issue of the front office, the owner, and the coach either all not being on the same page at the same time, or 2 of the 3 being on the same page, and nobody wants to really see how to make this work. In the case of the Carolina Panthers, the coach and the owner was not on the same page. Same thing happened in Washington. Coach, owner, not on the same page. Hell, we saw it with the Giants this year in the Hard Knocks episodes, where we saw the front office go against the owner and the coach. The coach, even though they focused on Jaden Daniels and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure that Brian Daboll would have been fine with Michael Penix. I'm certain he would have been fine with Michael Penix. But guess what? The Giants didn't make an effort to do that. What did they do? They drafted Malik Neighbors. Now, the Giants got to hope that they're so bad next year, that they get a high pick next year, and they're able to draft Shador or maybe Cam Ward. Because right now, we done just seen that Clint Ewers got injured. So now you got to hope and pray you can get high enough to get one of these really good quarterbacks coming out of college. But then guess what? Even then, you still have to develop the guy. And we saw the front office in the Hard Knocks episode disagree with the owner and the head coach and took a wide receiver. And these are the things that is always sad and disappointing when it comes to these young quarterbacks like this. They always come into the league with expectations, but there's never anybody to say, hey, you know what? We currently don't have our team built around this guy. Let's give this guy time, but let's bring the best coaching in place. And this goes back to even a lot of these coaches are so married to their systems that they don't even develop anymore. Like, most of these coaches are not developing anybody. They're not developing any of these players. And the sad part about it is that we've seen quarterbacks dwindle more and more and more. Everybody talked about how bad Justin Fields was, but he's had trash coaching when it's come to him developing. He's had trash coaching. I mean, now and with him going to Pittsburgh, he's getting better coaching now, but yet and still, he spent 4 years sitting up there trying to figure this thing out with terrible coaching in the process. Mac Jones, let's not act like we ain't see that Mac Jones got some bad coaching when it started out. Let's not pretend like he didn't. Let's not pretend like he didn't. He was pretty solid starting out, but then all of a sudden, boom, didn't have nothing around him. Didn't have anybody to really help him through. He wasn't that good. He ended up not being that good. Years ago, David Carr had to deal with the exact same thing. I mean, he was terrible his rookie year. He went to a Houston Texans team that was awful. And it's sad to see a guy like Bryce Young, who, again, has an extreme basket of potential. Especially when you're talking about a guy who can throw the ball accurately. I mean, nowadays, what you see now is that so many of these coaches are married to their systems that they don't even do what Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan and them did, which is develop an offense. We've seen Kyle Shanahan's offense, Kyle and Mike Shanahan's offense work with mobile quarterbacks and non-mobile quarterbacks. I mean, like, when you really analyze everything that's going on, we've seen them adapt their system over and over and over again. We've seen their understudies adapt their systems over and over and over again. Like right now in Houston, again, that's a Kyle Shanahan guy. That's a Mike Shanahan guy, but still, you're talking about he's adapted his system that he doesn't rely on the run so much. But again, these young quarterbacks shouldn't have to go through this. They should not have to go through this. I mean, we've seen guys truly develop guys. And we've seen guys go by the wayside. There are some quarterbacks who come in the league and they're just not that good. Will Levis is an example of that. You know, Will Levis, I remember evaluating Will Levis and telling people, yo, this dude, nah. He's too much like Carson Wentz. He throws like Carson Wentz. He makes mistakes. He makes the exact same mistakes as Carson Wentz. And he does stuff that never makes sense. And guess what? That translated right into the NFL. Because he's doing exactly what he was doing in college. He's doing it at the next level. Bryce Young didn't get that opportunity because everything that was on his team was horrible. And now they expect for him to be like, what, get better with a team that's still not that good? You really thought that? Canales is sitting up there and he's getting praise for something that, in all honesty, he had nothing to do with. Baker was already getting better because he was in the Sean McVay system. It's sad. It's very sad to see a guy with such potential in Bryce Young get benched so early on. And how he goes somewhere and even the ownership didn't think to put enough around him. They actually had, they didn't have a first round pick this year, but they had a lot on the table. They knew they needed offensive linemen. They knew this. They did do the smart thing and drafted a running back, but guess what? You can't do nothing when you don't have a line to block for the quarterback or the running back. And I'm going to tell y'all something. At this point right now, the only real quarterback developers in the league, in all honesty, might be Andy Reid and Andy Reid is a good, and what, Jim Harbaugh at this point? You know, Mike McDaniel's a pretty good quarterback developer. You know, when you really analyze it, it's Matt LaFleur is a pretty good quarterback developer. But again, why do these guys have to go to those particular coaches, to those particular teams to get any type of real development? They shouldn't have to do that. It's just sad to see that Bryce Young didn't get the fair shake he rightfully deserved, especially when you're talking about a guy who has potential that a lot of us saw coming out of the draft. The guy was insanely accurate, like insanely accurate. But he went to a team that had nothing. And C.J. Stroud got the benefit of going second to the Houston Texans. Think about that. He got the benefit of going second. He could right now we could be doing the reverse of C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young right now. Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud right now. We could be talking about C.J. Stroud being benched right now. That's how terrible that team is. We could be talking right now about C.J. Stroud being benched right now. Or maybe Frank Wright would have sat up there and did his dang job and would have actually developed C.J. Stroud. And but guess what? C.J. Stroud would have been still struggling because they still had nothing there that would have benefited him. It's sad. I'm just saying, it's sad to see young guys who got the potential to be very special guys and watch as the team and the coaches and the front office and the ownership don't do enough to make this guy great. Canales is clearly not a good coach. He's clearly not going to be a good coach. He clearly doesn't know how to develop. Because if he did, trust and believe, Bryce Young would be a different quarterback right now. Like I said, what we saw an insanely accurate guy in college. We saw that. And we saw this guy perform against top-level SEC defenses. We saw this guy do that. And somehow, some way, he gets to the next level, and all of a sudden, he's not that good. It's hard for me to believe. Y'all tell me what y'all think. How do y'all feel about Bryce Young being benched? And was it fair for him to really be benched? Did everybody really think about the impact that they will have now at this point? And also the fact that and how the coaching staff, the front office, and the owners, they all weren't in sync to sit up there and agree what was going on with this guy. Cause again, what we saw in college was not a fluke. This guy was really good on an Alabama team that had no real receiving weapons. And all of a sudden he comes to an NFL team that doesn't have the receiving weapons, doesn't have a line, and he's supposed to work magic? He can't do that. Y'all tell me what y'all think. Other than that, this has been your man John Fortune, and this has been the Frustrated Fan Sports Show.